Greetings, everyone, and welcome to Back to Ashes. My name is Phoenix. I'd like to give a very special shout out to the elite members of the channel. Thank you all so much for your dedicated and loving support. I cannot express my gratitude enough. With that being said, it is now time to go back to ashes, for once we arise from those ashes, we are a bigger, brighter, stronger, and a happier person every day. Sit back, relax, kick back, grab your snacks or tuck in and get warm, and prepare for your dose of vocal melatonin entitled True Let's Not Meet Stories. Right after this intro, there will be an ad. I'll read the first story, there will be an ad. And after that, there will be no more ads within this video. It was 2012, and the chill of late November clung to my bones like a curse. My ex-husband and I had come to Krakow for my birthday, a fleeting escape to a city draped in history and shadow. My heart was set on visiting Auschwitz, the Jewish Quarter, and Schindler's Factory, places that whispered of humanity's darkest hours. We arrived just before the Christmas market, its absence a quiet disappointment that lingered like a bad omen. Our hotel, a grand but nameless place, stood 15 minutes from the main square, its balcony overlooking the Vistula River, where the water moved like liquid obsidian under the gray sky. The staff were warm, their smiles almost too perfect, as if they knew something I didn't. We landed on a budget flight, the kind that rattles your nerves before you even touch the ground. It was mid-afternoon, the sky a sullen bruise of clouds spitting like drizzle. After settling into our room, we showered, changed, and set out to explore. Krakow was breathtaking, its beauty sharp and haunting, like a painting you couldn't look away from but didn't trust. The cloth hall loomed in the main square, its arches casting long shadows that seemed to follow us. We ate matzo ball soup and stew under heated lamps, wrapped in blankets that smelled faintly of smoke and thyme. The clock tower chimed in rhythm, steady but somehow mocking, as if counting down to something inevitable. I bought a cashmere coat from Zara, a soft gray thing, and a matching hat and scarf, detailing that would soon feel like cruel irony. Night fell and we wandered into one of Krakow's underground bars, carved into the catacombs like some forgotten crypt. The air was thick with cigarette smoke, a small mercy for a smoker like me in a world that shunned us. We drank, first a few, then more, the warmth of vodka dulling the edges of the world. By 1 a.m., exhaustion pulled at us, and we decided to return to the hotel. The bar's steps led us back to street level, where a taxi rank waited like a trap set in the dark. We climbed into a cab, its interior reeking of stale tobacco and something sharper, metallic. I gave the driver our hotel's name, my voice steady, despite the unease creeping up my spine. He nodded, his eyes glinting in the rearview mirror, and we set off. The driver only took cash, a detail that felt inconvenient but not alarming. Not yet. My ex-husband mentioned needing to stop at a cash point, and the driver grunted, his face unreadable. I had no phone with me. It was back at the hotel, a relic of 2012 when roaming charges were a luxury we skipped. My ex-husband's iPhone 3S was our only tether to the world, and it sat in his pocket as we drove through the drizzle-slicked streets. The journey should have taken 5 minutes. It didn't. We pulled up across from our hotel, a dual carriageway splitting the road like a wound. A petrol station and cash point glowed faintly on the opposite side, their lights flickering as if struggling to stay alive. My ex-husband signaled to the driver and stepped out, his silhouette swallowed by the mist as he crossed to the cash point. That's when it happened. The moment the world tilted into something sinister. The locks on the taxi doors snapped shut with a sound like breaking bones. Before I could process it, the driver floored the gas and the car lurched forward, tearing down the carriageway. My shopping bags slid across the back seat, their contents spilling like offerings to some malevolent force. I pounded on the window, my voice shrill as I demanded to know what was happening. The driver's eyes flicked to me in the mirror, cold and unyielding, like a predator sizing up its prey. I fumbled through my bags, showing him my empty wallet, thinking maybe this was about money. But he didn't care. He didn't stop. The city lights faded as we sped past Krakow's outskirts, the world dissolving into a void of black fields and snow-dusted roads. No streetlights, no signs of life, just the hum of the engine and the driver's silence, heavy as a threat. I begged, my words tumbling out in a mix of English and desperation, but he didn't speak my language, or didn't care to. His hand shot back, rough and forceful, shoving my head down into the seat. His voice was a guttural snarl, incomprehensible but dripping with menace. I went quiet, my heart hammering so loud I thought it might burst. He was on his phone now, speaking rapidly to someone in Polish, his tone sharp and angry. The road stretched on, endless and desolate, until we reached an industrial estate, a wasteland of warehouses and factories, their skeletal frames looming under flickering streetlights. The car stopped abruptly, the engine silence louder than any scream. I was petrified, my mind conjuring images of lockups and shallow graves, of becoming another ghost in a city already heavy with them. I was 34, a mother of 5-year-old twins, and the thought of them never seeing me again clawed at my soul. I prayed my sobs muffled against the leather seats, my hands clutching the cashmere coat as if it could shield me from whatever came next. The driver got out, his boots crunching on the icy ground. He yanked open the back door, grabbed me by my arm, and threw me onto the road. My shopping bags followed, hurled at me like an afterthought. He climbed back into the taxi and sped off, the taillights vanishing into the snow. But the relief I should have felt didn't come. Instead, dread coiled tighter, whispering that this wasn't the end, that he'd be back with others, that this was only the beginning of something worse. It was -8 degrees Celsius, maybe colder, and the snow fell in heavy, wet flakes that stung my face. I stumbled to my feet, my legs trembling, and scanned the desolate estate for shelter. There was nothing. No houses, no lights, just the hollow shells of warehouses and the endless dark. I found a gap in a hedge, barely wide enough to crouch in, and curled up there, pulling my coat and bags around me. The cold was a living thing, sinking its teeth into my bones. I cried until my tears froze on my cheeks. The silence around me so absolute, it felt like the world had forgotten me. Time blurred. An hour, maybe 2, passed in that frozen limbo. My body grew heavy, my thoughts sluggish, as if the cold was stealing my life, one breath at a time. I was dying. I knew it, felt it in the way my fingers stopped aching and my heart slowed. The sky began to lighten, a sickly gray that offered no warmth. A few cars passed, their headlights slicing through the snow, but my attempts to flag them down were feeble, my arms too weak to lift. I collapsed back into the hedge, resigned to the dark. Then, like a miracle I didn't deserve, a truck rumbled to a stop. A brother and sister on their way to market with cattle saw me sprawled across the hard shoulder. They dragged me into their truck, wrapping me in a jacket that reeked of cow dung but felt like salvation. I couldn't speak, my voice lost to the cold, but I mumbled about my children, my words incoherent. They found a napkin in my bag with the hotel's name scrawled on it, a lifeline I didn't know I had. They drove me 20 miles back to Krakow, back to the hotel where my ex-husband, the police, and the hotel manager had turned the lobby into a makeshift command center. I stumbled in, still clutching the filthy jacket, my body trembling but alive. The police swarmed to me, swabs, photographs, fingerprints, questions I could barely answer. Someone pressed a glass of brandy into my hands. It burned, the first real sensation I'd felt in hours. The next day, we visited Auschwitz, as planned, but the weight of the previous night clung to me, its shadow darker than the camp's history. That evening, the police took us to the taxi rank to identify the driver, but he was gone, a phantom who'd slipped back into the city's underbelly. The case was left with the Polish police, an open wound that would never heal. I don't know who was watching over me that night, but I felt their presence, a thin thread of grace in a world that had nearly swallowed me whole. Krakow's beauty was tainted now, its streets hiding secrets I'd never unlearn. I was alive, but the cold, the dark, and the driver's eyes would haunt me forever. A reminder that some nightmares don't end up when you wake up. So to that creepy taxi driver, I hope I never, ever meet you again. Back in 1986, I was 5 years old, a chubby, loud-mouthed kid living in the quiet suburbs of Baltimore, Maryland. The neighborhood was a picture of idyllic Americana, tree-lined streets where ancient oaks stood like silent, looming centennials, their gnarled branches casting jagged shadows that seemed to claw at the sidewalks. It was early October, and the air carried a crisp bite of autumn. Halloween decorations adorned every house. Jack-o'-lanterns were flickering grins, plastic skeletons dangling from porches, and fake cobwebs stretched across hedges, like traps set by some unseen predator. The neighborhood felt alive, but there was something unsettling beneath its charm, a faint pulse of wrongness that I was too young to name. I had been invited to a neighbor's birthday party, a boy named Tommy who lived a few houses down. His parents had spared no expense to make their son's 7th birthday unforgettable. A slow-moving donkey, its face sagging with an almost human sadness, plodded in circles in the backyard, offering rides to the smaller children. I, however, was deemed too heavy for the poor beast. My weight was a sore spot, and the rejection stung. But I masked it with my usual bravado, my loud voice echoing over the chatter of the other kids. The party was a whirlwind of cake, ice cream, and laughter. But the centerpiece of the festivities was something else entirely. A clown. He was tall, unnaturally so, his lanky frame draped in a garish costume of red and yellow polka dots, with a ruffled collar that looked like it was choking him. His face was painted white, the red smile drawn too wide, stretching ear to ear in a way that made it seem less like a smile and more like a wound. His eyes, though, those were what set my nerves on edge. They were bloodshot, sunken, and gleamed with something I couldn't place, something that made my stomach twist. He pranced silently through the crowd of children, his movements jerky like a marionette controlled by unsteady hands. He pulled coins from behind ears, did the tired, "I got your nose" trick, and twisted balloon animals that looked more like mangled creatures than dogs or giraffes. The other kids laughed, their voices high and carefree, but I hated him. Everything about him felt wrong. His silence wasn't playful. It was predatory, like he was waiting for something. I couldn't help myself. My loud mouth, always my shield, became my weapon. I heckled him, shouting insults from the back of the group as he fumbled through the act. "That's not magic, it's just a stupid trick," I'd yell, pointing out the hidden compartments in his hat or the strings on his props. The other kids giggled, but the clown never reacted. Not outwardly. His painted smile stayed fixed, but his eyes burned. They locked onto me, unblinking, and I swear I saw something shift in them, like a shadow moving behind a curtain. It wasn't anger. It was something deeper, something that made my skin crawl and my heart thump in my chest. The party moved inside for the clown's special magic show. The living room was dim, the curtains drawn, and the hardwood floor creaked under the weight of a dozen kids sitting cross-legged in a semicircle. I stood in the back, arms crossed, refusing to join the others. The clown performed his tricks, pulling a mangy fake rabbit from his hat, making scarves disappear into his sleeve. But his eyes never left me. Each time I shouted, "I see the trap door," or "It's in your pocket, dummy." His head would tilt slightly, and those bloodshot eyes would narrow, glinting with a quiet, seething rage. His smile never wavered, but it felt like a mask, hiding something that wanted to claw its way out. The show dragged on for 15 agonizing minutes, the air in the room growing thicker, heavier, like the house itself was holding its breath. Finally, Tommy's parents called out, "Piñata time!" and the kids erupted into cheers, stampeding outside to beat a cardboard donkey stuffed with candy. I lingered, my bladder screaming from the fruit punch I'd guzzled all afternoon. I needed a bathroom, and fast. The house was eerily quiet as I slipped back inside. The sun had dipped low, casting long, murky shadows through the windows. The kitchen was bathed in a sickly yellow light, and the hallway beyond it seemed to stretch into darkness, the kind that feels like it's watching you. I hurried through, my sneakers squeaking on the linoleum, when a figure stepped into the hallway from a side room. It was the clown. He stood there, motionless, his head tilted at an unnatural angle, like a doll left propped against a wall. His painted smile gleamed in the dim light, but his eyes, those bloodshot, hateful eyes, bore into mine. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. It was like a scene from one of those old cowboy movies my dad loved. A standoff in a dusty street, except this was no gunslinger. This was a clown, and I was a 5-year-old boy, alone in a darkening house. He took a slow, deliberate step toward me, his oversized shoes slapping the floor with a hollow thwack. "Piggy, piggy," he whispered, his voice low and sing-song, like a lullaby sung by something that didn't sleep. The words slithered through the air, wrapping around me like smoke. I stumbled backward, my heart pounding so hard I thought it would burst. I turned to run, my feet slipping on the floor, but a large gloved hand clamped on my shoulder. The force spun me around, and I crashed to the ground, the air knocked out of me. The clown loomed over me, his shadow swallowing the light. He placed one massive shoe on my chest, pinning me to the floor. I squirmed, my chubby limbs flailing, but it was no use. His weight was crushing, deliberate. I wanted to scream, to cry for help, but my voice was trapped in my throat, choked by fear. He reached into his costume and pulled out an old-fashioned seltzer bottle, the kind you'd see in a slapstick comedy. But there was no comedy here. His eyes gleamed with malice as he aimed the nozzle at me. "Biggie Piggy," he sang again, his voice dripping with mockery. "Let's make you shine." He squeezed the trigger, and a cold, sticky spray hit the crotch of my pants, soaking them through. The liquid smelled faintly of chemicals, sharp and unnatural. He kept spraying, his silent laughter shaking his shoulders until the bottle was empty. The humiliation burned hotter than the fear, but I couldn't move, couldn't fight back. When he finally lifted his foot, I lashed out, kicking at his shins with all the strength my 5-year-old body could muster. He didn't flinch. I scrambled to my feet and bolted, my wet pants clinging to my legs. I dove into a nearby pantry, slamming the door behind me. It was a terrible hiding place, barely 4 feet from where I'd been pinned. But it was all I had. The pantry was dark, the air thick with the acrid scent of pine-scented cleaner. There was no luck, no way to keep him out. I sank to the floor, my back against the shelf, trying to stifle the sobs that shook my body. My breath came in short, wheezing gasps, and a small, involuntary fart escaped me, the sound loud in the suffocating silence. "Oh, Biggie." The clown's voice came from somewhere close. Too close. "Did you make poopy in the pantry?" The words were laced with a sickening glee, and I froze, my blood turning to ice. Was he in here with me? The darkness pressed against my eyes, and I couldn't tell if he was standing inches away or still outside. My heart thundered, my mind racing with images of his painted face looming out of the shadows, his hands reaching for me. I dropped to my knees, pressing my face to the floor, squinting through the narrow gap between the door. The hallway was dim, but I could see a faint sliver of light. Then it went dark. A single bloodshot eye stared back at me through the gap, unblinking. Its pupil dilated like a predator's. A guttural laugh rumbled from the other side, low and guttural, followed by a hissed whisper. "Oh, Piggy." I squeezed my eyes shut, tears streaming down my face, and screamed, a raw, desperate wail that tore from my chest. The door flew open, and I braced myself for the clown's hands, his bottle, his hate-filled eyes. But instead, I heard a familiar voice. "What the hell are you doing?" It was my dad. His broad frame filled the doorway, his face a mix of confusion and concern. I sobbed, pointing wildly toward the hallway. "Clown!" I screamed, my voice breaking. He scooped me up, my wet pants soaking into his shirt, and carried me out of the pantry, through the kitchen, and back into the sunlight. The party was still going on, the kids oblivious, laughing as they swung at the piñata. The clown was nowhere to be seen. As we walked back to our house, I clung to my dad, my body trembling. I kept looking over my shoulder, expecting to see that painted face in the shadows of the trees. those bloodshot eyes watching me. The neighborhood, once so warm and welcoming, felt different now. The centennials of oaks seemed to lean closer, their branches whispering secrets I didn't want to hear. And somewhere in the back of my mind, I could still hear the sing-song voice echoing in the dark. Biggie Piggy, Pooh Piggy. I never saw that clown again. But even now, decades later, I can't look at a painted smile without feeling that cold spray on my skin, without hearing that voice in the dark. When I'm alone in a quiet house, I swear I can feel those bloodshot eyes watching me from the shadows and waiting. So whoever the hell you are, creepy clown, let's not meet. Summer 2008, and the air in rural western Pennsylvania carried a weight that clung to your skin, heavy with the scent of pine and decay. My town was one of those forgotten oil hamlets, long past its prime, where the forest seemed to swallow everything: houses, hopes, and secrets. The woods were a labyrinth of shadows, stretching for miles, isolating us from the next flicker of civilization. My family scraped by, but my friend, the one whose birthday I was attending, lived in a different world. His house was a sprawling monument to wealth in our crumbling town. A massive yard, a treehouse perched like a sentinel, a trampoline that creaked under our weight, and big screen TVs glowing in every room. He had every video game console you could name, a shrine to excess that made him stand out like a beacon in our desolate corner of the world. But he wasn't just rich. He was one of the kindest people I'd ever met. His family, a warm refuge when my mom was in the hospital. They took me in, fed me, treated me like one of their own. I still keep in touch with them, even now, when the memory of that night claws at the edges of my mind. His birthday parties were the stuff of legend among the kids in town. Closed canopy tents, movie projectors, soft-serve ice cream machines, and slushies that stained our tongues blue. But that year, when he was turning 13 or 14, the party felt different, smaller, quieter. The air was thicker, as if the forest itself was holding its breath. We spent the early evening playing video games, the hum of the consoles drowning out the distant rustle of leaves. As night fell, we switched to flashlight tag, a game we played like a twisted version of hide and seek. The rules were simple. The hiders vanished into the dark, alone or in pairs, seeking out the perfect spot, while the seekers, armed with flashlights and walkie-talkies, hunted them down. His yard was a sprawling playground, dotted with hiding places. The treehouse, the tangled branches by ancient oaks, the shadows cast by the house itself. Beyond the yard, though, lay the woods, a dense, unyielding wall of trees that seemed to pulse with a life of its own. My own house, a couple of miles down the road, had woods too, but nothing like this. These were wild, untamed, stretching 15 to 20 miles before the next town broke the silence. The first hour of flashlight tag was uneventful, almost comforting in its familiarity. We hid near the treehouse, clambered over branches, laughing too loudly, when a cop car cruised by, its headlights slicing through the dark. We froze, not because we were doing anything wrong, but because explaining why a bunch of kids were sneaking around at 11 p.m. with flashlights felt like tempting fate. The woods loomed at the edge of the yard, their shadows deeper than the night itself, but we stayed clear of them, at least at first. That night, I was a seeker. My group lounged in the house, sipping slushies that tasted faintly of chemicals, joking over the crackle of walkie-talkies while the hiders slipped into the darkness. We gave them time to scatter, their footsteps fading into the night, then stepped outside, flashlights cutting weak beams through the oppressive black. The air was cool, but it carried a strange weight, like the forest was watching. We'd barely begun our search when a chorus of screams shattered the silence. The hiders came tearing back to the house, their faces pale, eyes wide with something that wasn't just fear. It was terror, raw and primal. My group, confused, followed them inside, the door slamming shut behind us. It took agonizing minutes for them to calm down enough to speak. Their story came in fragments, each word trembling with dread. They decided to hide in the woods that round, venturing deeper than we ever had. The yard was too familiar, too safe, so they'd crept into the thick brush, where the trees seemed to lean closer, their branches clawing at the sky. They'd been searching for a spot, their whispers barely audible over the rustle of leaves, when one of them caught a glimpse of something at the edge of their vision. A shape, indistinct at first, easily mistaken for a tree or a deer. But the longer they stared, the clearer it became. It wasn't a tree. It wasn't an animal. It was human. They froze, their flashlights trembling as they tried to make sense of it. The figure stood just beyond the reach of their beams, half hidden in the dark, motionless, but undeniably there. They shouted, more out of instinct than bravery, and bolted back to the house, their footsteps pounding like a warning drum. Inside, we huddled together, the air thick with unease. I felt it too, a creeping dread that settled into my bones. Though I tried to hide it, my face a mask of calm, while my heart hammered. Some of the group, including my friend, were skeptical. He was almost angry, his voice sharp as he accused the hiders of trying to scare us, to turn his party into some cheap prank. He wanted to march out there himself, flashlight in hand, to prove it was nothing. The others stopped him, insisting we only go as a group or wake his parents, who were asleep upstairs, oblivious to the growing panic. To some of the boys, the ones who hadn't seen it, this was thrilling, like stepping into a horror movie. We are in a low-crime area, after all. What was one person against a group of us? Even if it was a prank, it'd be a story to tell. So, we hatched a plan. Most of the group armed themselves with flashlights and walkie-talkies, their bravado masking the unease that flickered in their eyes. They wanted to bring my friend's dog, a golden retriever collie mix, but he was useless for protection, more likely to lick an intruder than bark. He was a fetch in the yard kind of dog, not built for leashes or the wild. I stayed behind with another kid. The two of us deemed the scaredy cats. We waited in the house, clutching the spare walkie-talkie, ready to wake my friend's parents or call the cops if things went wrong. I didn't admit it, but I was grateful to stay inside. The house felt like a fortress, its walls a thin barrier against whatever lurked outside. But the woods, they were something else, something ancient, something that didn't want us there. The investigators ventured out, their flashlight beams slicing through the dark as they approached the woods. The walkie-talkie crackled with their voices, excited at first, then tense, then silent. Too silent. Minutes dragged on, each second stretching into eternity. Then a burst of static, followed by shouting. They came crashing back to the house, their faces ashen, their breaths ragged. It took time to piece together their story, each word dripping with a fear that made my skin crawl. They'd reached the edge of the woods where the trees grew so dense they seemed to swallow the light. They searched, their beams darting through the underbrush, until one of them caught something in his flashlight's glow. A figure, half hidden beyond a gnarled tree, tall and lanky, with long unkempt hair that hung like a shroud. He didn't move, didn't speak, just tilted his head, his eyes glinting into the brief flash of light. The boy who saw him screamed, and the others, catching the same fleeting glimpse, followed. They ran, the forest seeming to chase them, its branches snapping at their heels. They swore it was a man. His silhouette burned into their minds. Tall, silent, watching. My friend's mom came downstairs then, drawn by the chaos. We spilled the story, our voices overlapping in a frantic mess. She locked every door, her face tight with worry, and told us to stay inside. She mentioned the woods weren't entirely theirs, that they bled into someone else's land, a boundary we never thought to question. We tried to settle down, sprawled on air mattresses in the game room, but sleep was impossible. The other scaredy-cat kid hid beneath his mattress, as if that could shield him from whatever was out there. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, the hum of the big screen TV doing nothing to drown out the memory of their words. A man. Watching. Waiting. Just before sunrise, I drifted into a fitful sleep, haunted by dreams of eyes glinting in the dark. When I woke, the others were outside, eating pancakes on the patio as if nothing had happened. My friend's mom had checked the woods at dawn and found nothing. No footprints, no signs of disturbance, but her calmness felt forced, her eyes darting to the tree line as she spoke. We were all on edge, but we pretended otherwise, laughing too loudly, eating too quickly. When my parents picked me up, I realized how close my house was. Just 2 miles away, a 10-minute walk through the same forest that had swallowed our screams. For weeks I couldn't sleep. Every creak of my house, every rustle outside my window felt like him, the man in the woods. His head tilted, his eyes locked on me. I went back to my friend's house to play video games, hoping to shake the feeling. But when I brought up that night, he shut me down. His voice was sharp, his eyes avoiding mine, as if the memory was a wound he didn't want to reopen. He offered an explanation, though, one that should have comforted me, but didn't. He said it was probably a neighbor's son, a tall kid with long hair, a few years older than us. He's weird, he said, the word heavy with an unspoken implication. Maybe mental issues, maybe just a jerk who liked scaring kids. He claimed the kid had seen us playing and decided to mess with us, hiding in the woods to spook us. It made sense on the surface, but it didn't sit right. When someone pulls a prank, they reveal it. They laugh. They gloat. They want you to know they got you. like the time my friend's older brother rustled our tent during a sleepover, then stuck his head in, grinning at our startled faces. But this was different. The man in the woods didn't laugh. He didn't step out to take credit. He just watched, his head tilted, his silence more terrifying than any shout. But my friend hadn't seen him. None of the skeptics had. His explanation was second-handed, a story he stitched together to make sense of something that didn't. Then there was the memory it dredged up, one I'd buried years ago. I've been going to my friend's house since I was a kid, and one summer, we played a game with a neighbor across the street. We threw moldy crab apples at each other, a makeshift dodgeball game that ended up when the neighbor, a kid a few years older, hurled one at my friend's head with vicious force. My friend crumpled, sobbing, and I dragged him inside. His parents were furious, saying they warned him about the kid, that he wasn't nice. That boy didn't have long hair, but it made me wonder, was he the one my friend blamed? Or was it someone else entirely? What gnawed at me most was that my friend never gave me a name. I pressed him, but he deflected, his usual warmth replaced by a curtness that felt wrong, like he was hiding something. I don't think he was lying, not exactly. I think he was scared I'd stop coming over, scared we'd lose the friendship that had carried us through so much. But his silence left too many questions. If it was the neighbor's son, why didn't he act like a prankster? Why didn't he show himself? And if it wasn't him, then who the hell was it? Someone who slipped into the woods at night, watching a group of kids, silent and still. His intentions locked behind that tilted head? That was the last sleepover I had at his house. Not because of the incident, not entirely, but because high school changed things. Sleepovers turned into parties with a different kind of edge, and the woods faded into the background of our lives, but they never left me. Years later, I can't look at a tree line without feeling it, that prickle on my neck, that sense of eyes just out of sight. My friend's explanation might be true. It might have been a weird kid playing a cruel joke, but the alternatives are worse. A man in the woods, watching, waiting, with no reason to be there. A man who could have followed me home, 2 miles through the dark, to stand in my yard, his head tilted, his eyes glinting in the moonlight. So, to the mysterious man in the woods, thank you for traumatizing my childhood. Let's never meet again. The summer of 2017 clung to me like damp rot, a humid weight that pressed against my skin as I stood at the hostess stand of the chain restaurant where I worked. I was 17, born in 2000, still green enough to think the world was mostly good, mostly safe. The restaurant was a revolving door of faces. New hires came and went like ghosts. The turnover so high we barely learned names before they vanished. We weren't picky about who we hired. The bar was low, scraped along the floor. Anyone with a pulse and a willingness to show up could get a job. That's how he walked in. It was a Tuesday, late afternoon. The sky outside bruised with clouds that promised rain but never delivered. The man who stepped through the glass doors was unremarkable at first glance. Mid-40s, maybe 5'9", average build, dressed in a garish Hawaiian shirt that hung loosely over khaki cargo shorts. His hair was a dark grayish brown, was thinning, combed over in a futile attempt to hide the scalp beneath. A small gap between his front teeth caught the light when he smiled. But it was his eyes that stopped me cold. They were empty, like twin voids, brown, so dark they seemed to swallow light rather than reflect it. He asked for the manager, Michael, my friend, and one of the few steady anchors in this place. Michael met him in the corner booth, their voices low, muffled by the clatter of dishes and the hum of conversation. After half an hour, they shook hands and the man left, his shadow lingering in the doorway like a stain. Michael came back to the hostess stand, his usual grin faltering. "That guy," he said, shaking his head. "Looks like a serial killer from a bad TV movie." He laughed, the kind of nervous laugh that masks unease, joking about his creepy vibe, his vague backstory. He was from California, he said, a former male escort with no real job history to speak of. A second interview was scheduled for the following Tuesday. "Great," I muttered. "Our very own psychopath coworker." The jokes carried us through the week, a way to diffuse the tension that clung to the thought of him. When he was hired, we kept it up, calling him the serial killer behind his back, giggling like kids, daring each other to knock on the haunted house door. His name was John. On the surface, he was fine. A little too friendly, maybe. His hands lingering too long on shoulders. His comments to the girls, myself included, edging into inappropriate. He grabbed my waist as I passed, his fingers pressing just a little too hard, murmuring, "You're looking sexy today," or making low guttural noises that made my skin crawl. I was 16 when I started working there, 17 now, and I told myself it was harmless. Everyone did. Looking back, it's sickening how we let him slide, how we shrugged off what was so clearly wrong, like we were all under some collective spell. John had a fixation on me, a glint in those dead eyes, whenever I was near. It wasn't affection, it was something hungrier, something that made my stomach twist. I kept him at arm's length, always polite, always smiling, because some primal part of me whispered to stay on his good side, just in case. When he invited the staff to a barbecue at his house, I went, not because I wanted to, but because I couldn't risk being the one who said no. People pleaser maybe, or just a teenager too naive to trust her gut. I arrived at his place at 4, as he'd instructed. My car crunching gravel in a neighborhood that was too nice for someone like him. His house was a 2-story with neatly trimmed hedges, 2 cars gleaming in the driveway, a boat parked under a tarp. Money? Clearly. But from where? He greeted me at the door, his arms wrapping around me in a hug that lasted too long, his breath hot against my ear. Come in," he said, his voice syrupy, leading me inside. The house smelled of stale air and something metallic like old coins. "Help me with the burgers?" he said, grinning. "I'm vegetarian. Don't know the first thing about meat." It was an odd excuse, but I brushed it off, chalking it up to his eccentricity. I was early, as always, expecting Michael, his girlfriend, Megan, 3 other kids, and another coworker, Justin, to show up soon. But the house was silent, the kind of silence that presses against your eardrums. John led me to the backyard, a sprawling space enclosed by a tall privacy fence. 2 small sheds hunched in the corner, like silent sentinels. A garden bloomed unnaturally lush, its vegetables too perfect, too vibrant. "This is where you dismember people and bury them, right?" I joked, trying to lighten the mood, my voice thin against the quiet. John's smile didn't reach his eyes. "You got me," his tone playful, but laced with something darker. "Ex-wives make the best fertilizer." He laughed, but it was a hollow sound, and my own chuckle died in my throat. He latched onto our serial killer jokes at work, turning them into his own twisted humor, always talking about hiding bodies, about blood nourishing the soil. I played along because what else could I do? It was a joke, right? Back in the kitchen, he handed me an apron, his fingers brushing mine as he did. "You look so sexy in that," he said, pulling out his phone. "Let me take a picture for the girls. They love you, you know." My smile was forced, my skin prickling as he snapped the photo. I glanced at my phone. An hour had passed, and no one else had arrived. I texted Michael, my fingers trembling slightly. "When are you getting here?" His reply made my blood run cold. "John said 6. You're already there?" Why had he told me 4? Why was I alone with him? "Come sit with me," John called from the living room, patting a recliner that felt more like a trap than a seat. I sat, my body rigid, as he sprawled on the couch across from me, a beer in one hand, a pistol in the other. The gun wasn't unusual. Texas, after all. But the way he toyed with it, spinning it lazily on his finger, made my heart pound. "You don't drink?" he asked, gesturing with the beer. I shook my head, my voice barely above a whisper. "I'm only 17. He chuckled, a sound like gravel scraping. 16? 17? What's the difference? You're mature for your age." He tapped away on his phone, muttering something about a 16-year-old and a gun, and my stomach lurched. Was he joking? I texted Michael again, my fingers shaking. "Hurry." When Michael, Megan, and their kids finally arrived, the air shifted, but the unease didn't dissipate. John's demeanor changed, his charm dialed up, but there was a sharpness to it, like a blade hidden in velvet. We ate at a long table in the backyard, the burgers undercooked, blood pooling on the plate. John mixed cocktails for everyone, even me, his eyes lingering as he handed me the glass. I sipped it once, the burn of alcohol foreign and wrong, and set it aside. Megan stood up to get a refill, and John's voice cut through the air like a whip. "Sit down." The table froze, her hand hovering over her glass. His face was calm, but his eyes were storm clouds. "You're the guest. I'll get it." He took her cup, his movement deliberate, and we exchanged glances, the kind that says, "Something's wrong," without words. He returned with her drink, his smile back in place, but the moment lingered like a bad dream. As the night wore on, John's mood swung wildly. He spoke of his kids, 3 of them, 1 adult, 2 younger, from a marriage in California that ended badly. His oldest, a deaf girl who seemed to shrink in his presence, only visited to drop off her siblings. He didn't have custody, saw them rarely, and there was a bitterness in his voice when he mentioned their mother. Then, abruptly, he turned to Michael's daughter, a shy girl of maybe 6, and put her on his lap. "I love you," he said, his voice thick, tears in his eyes. "Say it back." She did, her voice small, and he broke down, sobbing about how happy he was to have friends, how he wished we could stay forever. The air grew heavy, the silence suffocating, broken only by Justin obviously chewing his burger. When my mom arrived to pick me up, John's demeanor shifted again. He pulled us both into one of his sheds, the door creaking shut behind us. The space was cramped, filled with tools and shadows, the air thick with the smell of oil and earth. He sat down, his eyes fixed on my mom. "Thank you for letting your daughter be my friend," he said, his voice low, fervent. "It means the world to me. I know it's weird, me being older, her being a kid, but it makes me happy." He repeated it over and over for 10 agonizing minutes until my mom, her face tight, said, "We're leaving." He followed us to the car, blocking the driver's side door, his body a wall between us and the escape. "Please don't leave," he said, his voice soft but insistent, his eyes boring into mine. My mom's hands shook as she buckled her seatbelt, and finally, he stepped aside, claiming it was too dark for us to drive. Michael and Megan still waiting in their car. John had ordered them to stay, looking relieved as we emerged. Later, Michael told me John had called my mom crazy, said she was on drugs for rushing us out. Months later, John's shadow loomed again. I was waiting at the restaurant for Logan, another coworker, to finish a shift so we could catch a movie. John appeared, ostensibly, to pick up his paycheck, but his eyes locked onto me the moment he saw me alone. "What are you doing?" he asked, his smile too wide, too eager. I explained about the movie, hoping he'd leave me, but he leaned in, his breath sour. "Why wait here? Come to my house. Logan can meet you there." My gut screamed no, but my people-pleasing nature won out. I texted Logan, who sounded concerned but agreed. At John's house, he handed me a glass of orange juice and vodka, ignoring my reminder that I was underage. "Hold this," he said, pressing a gun into my hands. The weight of it, cold and heavy, made my heart race. "You look so sexy with that," he murmured, his eyes gleaming. I set the gun down, my hands trembling, and focused on a half-finished puzzle on the table. Anything to avoid his gaze. Outside, rain began to fall, a soft patter that felt like a warning. John sat on the couch, cleaning an array of guns spread across the coffee table, their barrels glinting in the dim light. When Logan arrived, relief flooded me. But John wasn't done. He insisted we stay for a drink, then another, his voice growing sharper each time Logan tried to leave. "You've been drinking," he said, snatching Logan's keys with a chuckle that didn't match his eyes. "Wouldn't want you to crash." He brought out a small safe, fumbling with the lock, his frustration palpable. When he finally opened it, it was filled with $2 bills and dollar coins. Worthless trinkets he claimed would make us rich. He handed us 2 Sacagawea coins, his fingers lingering on mine. Then he pulled out a gold-plated gun with a mother-of-pearl handle, pointed it at the wall, and pulled the trigger. The click of an empty chamber echoed like a gunshot. "Whoops," he said, laughing. "Glad that wasn't loaded." He suggested we go get some drugs, his eyes wild, and Logan seized the chance, grabbing his keys. We fled to Michael's house, spilling the story of John's erratic behavior, the guns, the drinks. And as we spoke, Michael's phone buzzed, texts from John, calling us liars, evil, saying we were using him. Logan's eyes widened. I forgot my phone at his house. We crafted an excuse. My mother needed me home. We couldn't find drugs, and Logan went back alone. When he returned, pale and shaken, he described John hugging him, refusing to let go, whispering that Logan was his best friend. John's behavior at work grew stranger, his mood swinging from maniac laughter to sullen silence. He quit a few months later, vanishing to Tennessee, or so we heard. I found his mugshot online, a 2013 arrest for assault. His empty eyes staring through the screen. The memory that haunts me most is a conversation from one of his better days. When he leaned close, his voice low and fervent. You and me, we could run off together, he said. Rob banks, kill people, have lots of sex. You'd be my Bonnie, I'd be your Clyde. You're the woman of my dreams. I was 17. I hope I never see John again. In the quiet of the night, I still hear his voice, feel his eyes, and wonder how close I came to disappearing into his garden. So, John, if you're still out there, let's not meet. And that, dear listeners, brings a close to these true Let's Not Meet stories. I'd like to take a moment and acknowledge the rest of the membership of Back to Ashes. Thank you all so much for your dedicated and continuous support. Without you, I wouldn't have a voice and this channel would not exist. And there are no words that I can say but thank you. If you are new to the channel and you like what you have heard, please leave some love below with a like, a share, and a comment. And if you'd like to become part of the family here at Back to Ashes, hit that subscribe button and make sure you set your notification bell to all. That way you don't miss a video that I upload. If you are sleeping, I hope Slumberland is treating you comfortably. If you're awake, I hope you've enjoyed these selections. In the meantime, please stay vigilant and stay safe out there. I'll be reading to you soon. Have yourselves a good morning, a good afternoon, or a good evening. Peace, love, and light to you all.